How is your monthly Social Security deposit calculated? I'll tell you. Hello, I'm Kevin Knaus, and I turned 62 in 2025, and that is a very important year for Social Security because they consider age 62 the retirement age. And when you turn 62, that locks in some of the numbers they use to determine your monthly Social Security deposit, which is also called your primary insurance amount that you receive when you turn your full retirement age. But let's go ahead and look at my situation, and that'll kind of shed some light on how they determine the monthly Social Security deposit. First, Social Security starts with your earnings history, and they know your earnings history from your federal taxes that you filed. So I started filing federal taxes on earnings, my employment, in 1980, and then in 2025 I made an estimate because the year wasn't over yet. But you can see it's kind of a roller coaster. I started I started a business in 2001. That's why it dropped down. In 2011, 2012, my income dropped to zero because I started my insurance business, and then it climbed back up. So it's kind of a roller coaster. Now, these old historic earnings numbers need to be adjusted for inflation. They index them, and it's a little bit more complicated than just adjusting for inflation. There are particular numbers that are established every year from the National Average Wage Index. I think it comes from the Department of Labor. But anyhow, so they need to raise up your historic earnings, and they take the average wage index base year divided by the average wage index of the year in question. So I turned 62 in 25. My base year, anyone's base year, is 2 years prior to age 62. So it's age 60 is the base year that they're looking at. So the average wage index for 2023, when I turned age 60, was $66,622. Now we'll just go ahead and look at 1986. The average wage index for 1986 was $17,322. So those are numbers that are set by the federal government. You divide that numbers together, and it comes out with an index factor of 3.85. So you take my 1986 earnings of $14,515 times that index factor of 3.85, and it is indexed to $55,883. Kind of close to today's standards. That's that where you make. Now, if you look at the index factor, if you graph it, you'll see it makes sense that it is higher, over 5, in the early years, going back to the 70s and 80s, and then gently slopes down until it is 1, because none of your earnings are indexed after age 60. So age 60, whatever you earn there is 1. That is just the earnings that they will factor into the overall Social Security process. And what is the next step? It is taking your 35 highest years of earnings over your work history. Now, if you don't have 35, that's going to lower your primary insurance amount. And that's where, like those gaps I had where I made zero income, that can impact you. But they take all of those numbers and they sum it together. And what I've done is I have indexed those numbers and put it on a graph. So you can see this red line are the indexed numbers over the historic earnings. And you can see it was quite high back in the 90s, drops down, and then the historic earnings come together with the index earnings, in 2023 because it is 1. It's an index of 1. And so Social Security looks through that, takes the highest 35 years of the indexed earnings and totals that together. So for me, it is $2,668,490. Now they want to establish the average index monthly earnings. So that is the sum of the highest 35 years divided by 420. Why 420? Because that's 35 years times 12 months. So you get 420. And that equals the average index monthly earnings. For me, they take that $2 million indexed sum of the 35 years, my highest 35 years of wages, divide by 420, and my average index monthly earnings is $6,353. Okay. The next portion, the next steps are mind-bending, and they use bin points. And what the Social Security Administration is doing is they're taking your average index monthly earnings and they're bending it down to the primary insurance amount, that which you can collect at full retirement age. And it's mind-bending, goes through a couple different steps. After you do it a couple times, it makes sense. But essentially the formula is, first step is 90% of bin point 1, you have a result. Then you do 32% of bin point 2 minus bin point 1, result B. And then the last step is 15% of the AIM minus bin point 2, and then you total all those together, and that is a primary insurance amount. Now, when I mention, age 62 is very critical, age 62 sets the bin points. And so those bin points, for calculating the primary insurance, always move with you after age 62. They don't change. That's the year that you turn 62 or the year of those bin points. And so for me, 2025, the first bin point is 1,226. The second bin point is 7,391. Now, within this calculation, if the average index monthly earnings amount is less than a bin point, you substitute the AIM for the bin point. But let's go through an example where someone has an average index monthly earnings of $8,000. The first bin point is just going to be a straight 90% of 1226 for 1103. Second bin point, now that's going to be the second bin point minus the first one, so that's $6,165 times 32%, 1973. That's going to be for everyone that has an AIM over the second bin point. Then the third step is the AIM minus the second bin point. So that's going to be, this $8,000 minus the $7,391. That leaves $609 times 15%. That's 91. They total those three numbers together, those three products together, for $3,168 is that individual's primary insurance amount. Okay. Well, let's look at, this is how it looks graphically for a person that has an $8,000 AIM. You can see how it, starts off at 90%. Now again, if the individual's AIM is $1,000, less than the first bin point, it's going to be 90% of $1,000 or $900. And that's all they're going to get. That's going to be their primary insurance now. But in this case, we had the first step at 90%, then another step at 32%, and then a 15% step. For me, 90% of 1226, we got 1103. Now, my AIM is below the second bin point. So we're going to take my AIM of 6,353 minus the 1226. That leaves us $5,127 times 32%. That gives us a yield of $1,641. I have no step 3 because my AIM is less than the second bin point, so that's 0. So you total those two numbers together, $2,744 is what my primary insurance amount, my monthly Social Security deposit, will be in today's dollars when I turn my full retirement age at age 67. Now, obviously, it will go up. If I collect Social Security at age 62, I will only get 50% of that PIA, or $1,921. If I wait until age 70, I will collect 124% of the PIA, or $3,402. Now, everyone can increase their primary insurance amount, and it can happen by two ways. First, higher future earnings. So if my future earnings for 2025 and 2026 out into the future are higher than my previous 35 years of earnings, they'll push out those lower numbers and put in the higher numbers for 2025 and 2026 if my income is in the highest 35. That will marginally increase my average index monthly earnings, which is then used in the bin point formula. Not huge, but it could be substantial. The next is the cost of living allowances. So once you turn 62, then and you apply for Social Security, they're going to apply the cost of living allowances, because remember that they stop indexing the income at age year 60. So it's not inflated at all, but it will be, the PIA will be adjusted for cost of living allowances that apply to everyone's Social Security in January. So I think in January 2025, it was like a 2.5% cost of living allowance. So that bumps up everyone's payment. So your PIA will increase because of cost of living, but future earnings are the big one. So that's how it's kind of calculated in a nutshell. If you have any questions or comments, you may leave those down below, and I will do my best to answer them. Otherwise, for InsureMeKevin.com, I'm Kevin Knauss.